Hi everyone, my name is Brynn Wiessner and I served with young adults in Global Mission in Madagascar in 2015 to 2016.
Hi everyone, my name is Quentin Bernhard. I am a YAGM alum. I was in Senegal from 2022 to 2023 and I lived in Yeumbeul, Ben Barak in the greater Dakar region of Senegal. And during that time, I served with our partner organization, Senegalese Lutheran Development Services, or SLDS, and I lived with a host family in Yeumbeul, Ben Barak.
Hello, my name is Joseph Kuzilwa. I served in the UK in the 2024-2025 cohort. So before participating in YAGM, my understanding of advocacy was fairly surface level. I thought of it mainly as attending protests, signing petitions, and or posting about social justice issues online in hopes of changing the minds of the people that I am close with in my social circle. However, that always felt very distant and it always felt very reactive, and not always did it feel like it was rooted in relationships or long-term commitments. And so that obviously changed during my time in the UK. I witnessed advocacy was often very quiet and consistent and deeply relational. It wasn't always about loud public action. It was about listening, showing up, and standing in solidarity. I saw how people resisted injustices through mutual support, storytelling, and organizing that centered the voices of those who were most affected. And that made me reflect on how often advocacy in the US can be about speaking for others rather than speaking with them. So now, since returning, my involvement in advocacy has become more grounded and more intentional. Something that YAGM has really helped solidify in myself is my passion for serving with people who are facing food insecurity. That's something that I did work in prior to doing YAGM, but working alongside a community that did face food insecurity, it just heightened my empathy and understanding of that need. And so returning back to the US, I've been focusing on how I could be a lot more intentional and more locally focused when it comes to advocating for people who are food insecure, or advocating for communities that are food insecure, and how to recognize that my role as an individual is to amplify rather than lead. And I've learned that advocacy starts really with humility and presence, and change often is very slow, and throughout the process, persistency is key.
I was really drawn to sort of the central message within YAGM, which is accompaniment, just walking alongside each other in life. And the program also really opened my eyes to a lot of social justice issues that I wasn't really aware of prior to participating in this program. And it actually influenced my decision to pursue a career in the field of social work when I returned from my volunteer year. And this was because I wanted to work towards justice and equity amongst different issues in my own community here in the US.
Following my time in Senegal, I spent a year serving as an ELCA Hunger Advocacy Fellow, where I was with our Lutheran Advocacy Office called Lutheran Advocacy Ministry in Pennsylvania, or LAMPA, which is a state public policy office of the ELCA based in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, our state capital. And during my time in Senegal, I really started to ask a lot of new questions about my faith, what it meant to live out my faith, and also questions about community. What does it mean to be in community and to enter in community in new ways than the ones that maybe we're used to or the ones that we grew up with, as was the case for me. This was my first time being in Senegal. And these sort of questions and their roots in our faith as Lutherans and in our model of mission and accompaniment in the YAGM program really were valuable for me in propelling me into this Hunger Advocacy Fellowship, which I then moved into as a way of thinking about what does it mean to live out our faith, in addition to through accompaniment, in advocacy. And advocacy is something I had some experience with prior to my time in Senegal, with a variety of different advocacy campaigns and grassroots organizations and that sort of thing. But this really helped me understand and ask new questions about what does it mean to do this as church, right? As the body of Christ in the world, as people who are living out our faith as Christians and engaging in relationship and in advocacy, seeking justice, peace, all these things as part of the church, and really learning about the ways that we do this as Christians, as followers of Jesus, and as the ways we're called to respond and do this.
YAGM has truly meant so much to me and continues to mean so much to me in my life. It was a foundational experience for me in my life and faith journey, and honestly was life-changing for me. And one of the most special things to me about my experiences with YAGM have been all of the relationships that I've developed along the way, both in my host community in Madagascar and amongst fellow volunteers and alumni of this program.
During my time in accompaniment in Senegal with YAGM, I really came to appreciate and understand on a much more deep and a much more visceral level what it means to participate in and engage in God's mission in a way that's centered around and shaped by relationships, and particularly relationships across difference, relationships that center our accompaniment values such as mutuality, inclusivity, sustainability, empowerment, vulnerability. And I really began to see how relationships and accompaniment can shape and inform in so many ways the advocacy that we engage in. During my time as a fellow with LAMPA, we often engaged in work with coalition partners on a variety of issues that have impacts across the globe. Issues including care for God's good creation, issues including dealing with hunger, dealing with housing insecurity, the housed and the unhoused, dealing with issues around justice, dealing with issues around peace and conflict. What does that mean to engage in these issues as citizens and as people of faith with regard to our various levels of government, whether that's at the state level, as we did often with LAMPA, whether that's how we do it with our Washington office in Washington, D.C., where there's a staff there as part of our ELCA Witness and Society team, or whether that's how we engage internationally with offices like the Lutheran Office for World Community, which has a seat at the United Nations in New York City. And all these places, there were other fellows, other young adults with whom I was working alongside on various issues. So not only were we working in tandem, right, as a whole church, of which there are many different expressions and ministries and pieces and members engaged in advocacy alongside neighbors, but also ways in which we engage with different partners, right, that might not even be faith-based. For example, in our work around issues of hunger, we worked with different food pantries and different food banks, helping people of faith who are engaged in these forms of direct service in their own communities lift up their stories. During my time in Senegal, I was witness to the way legacies of policy decisions and many other pieces of our history have an impact on communities that continues to be felt and seen in many ways today.